Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and thank you for stopping by once again. I've been struggling with a viral infection of some kind over the last week or so, and thus, as a result, I haven't been here at the channel. I just didn't have the energy, frankly, to do a decent job of any kind of video. I do these in the late afternoon, and by that point in time, I was not feeling up to anything. Now I feel a little bit better, so I'm going to go ahead and make one today. I am working on something a bit more ambitious and more involved. I have the pieces put together. Now I have to find the time and be in the right spirit to get the thing videotaped. Now, that will likely be a little longer than the normal, and I'm probably going to divide it up into at least two portions. It has to do with the real estate in different parts of the country. So I want to get those done and then put them out at the same time, one following the other, the same day or night. So you can see them both, rather than one of these, send out one and then wait a week for the second one and so forth. So that will be the next step. But prior to that, I wanted at least to come on for a couple minutes here. I thought I'd share a story with you because it is relevant to a question I'm always asked, no matter how many times I may answer it in videos or to tour groups or one thing or another, is why I came to Panama. And it's really more about not just Panama, but countries like Panama. I try to be as open about this as I can. I think Panama is the best of the lot, but hey, that's me, and you may have another. But it was back in 2004, in February, that I came down from the U.S. I spent most of my adult life as a professional economic development consultant all over the world. And I had so many times been sent in, as we used to say, to do 3 months of work in 3 weeks, because that's often what a consultant has to do. You have to hit the ground running, and you have to really work at it. And for years and years and years, I did that without any internet, so you didn't go in to look anything up on Wikipedia. It didn't exist. And there was a lot less information available and many fewer statistics gathered, and in so many ways, it was really challenging to get all the information you needed. So you did your best with what you had, but you learned. I did it for decades, and after a while, you know where to look, you know the questions to ask, you know what you have to do, and to get people to open up and talk to them, and then who might in the government have some information that might be useful to you, and you have to keep moving and grabbing this and putting it together so that you could use that in the creation of your recommendations. And I do that. So when I came down to Panama, arriving in a new country was not anything unusual for me. I'd done it 35, 40, 45 times before. And so I knew pretty much what I needed to do, but I was very relaxed. I didn't feel like I needed to do any of that. I had told friends that I would take a vacation and see the Panama Canal. Now, I never take vacations, so this took quite a shock, quite a surprise to people I worked with. And they said, okay, great, good idea. I didn't want to say I'm looking at it from the potential of living there after I've finished working up here or retirement or whatever. I just thought, that's my business. I don't need to share that, and if Panama doesn't work out, then nothing lost. And I will indeed have had a wonderful time, and I will have seen the Panama Canal. So I didn't feel I could lose in this business. Down I came, and immediately started to do what I always did all my life. It was really interesting to me that even though I was completely relaxed and I didn't have a client and I didn't have to satisfy somebody, it was my nickel, I was paying her everything, I didn't have to do anything other than sit back and enjoy myself. The point is that I began immediately looking at Panama as I had looked at these other 40-some countries I'd worked in before, and asking many of the same questions and looking at the way people interacted with each other and how they interacted with me, asked a lot of questions and so on. And speaking the language is not critical, you especially in a place like Panama, where you can normally find somebody who can speak enough of your own. I've had to work in nations that very little English is spoken, and none of the major languages of the world are spoken. And so then you have to have an interpreter. A little bit clumsier, but you get used to it, you work with it. Here, that wasn't necessary. So I went to work, so to speak, without meaning to. And it was amazing how quickly I made up my mind that this was good. I had already seen, from the viewpoint of the economy, the society, the politics of the situation, prior to coming, that this nation was already a step ahead of its neighbors. And since then, it is more than just a step ahead. It's substantially ahead. But back then, it was still moving in the right direction, and it was doing surprisingly well for a country that had had difficult times at various points in the 20th century. So I was pleased with what I saw. But it wasn't final. And I was staying in a place called El Valle del Antón, which is up in the mountains, not far west, many of you have heard of, in Boquete, what have you, but it's a place closer in toward Panama City. Beautiful area, just a very delightful place. And I was staying in a very delightful hotel, and I'm on the second floor, and I look out into the branches of a tree and flowers and gardens and everything else. Thoroughly beautiful, and it was gorgeous weather, right? So I'm sitting around there that particular afternoon, and I'm pacing back and forth because I've just been challenged by people I'm visiting with there. Is Panama where you want to live? You've seen it now, you've asked lots of questions. I mean, what do you think about this? And I was back and forth, and yeah, I knew I did, but I had to challenge all of it. You're an analyst. When you're an analyst, you do that. You don't assume that your emotional response is accurate. You deal with the analytical, the facts as you can get them, and as well as your emotional response. But that comes later. First, you do your analysis, and I'm doing that. But I had this odd feeling. I felt like I was about to float off. I felt light. I didn't feel like I was going to float off, really, but I felt like 20 pounds lighter or something. It was an odd sensation. I thought, what's happening? Why do I feel this way? And I had been staring out onto the gardens and onto this very beautiful day in this beautiful rural area of Panama, just seeing it while thinking in my head. But the rest of my mind, even though the part of it was working on these questions, another part of it was enjoying the scenery, so to speak. And it just dawned on me that for years I had worried about terrorism, long before 9/11. For many Americans, that was the first time they really came to grips with it. But I've been traveling all over the world, and often in airports in Europe, it was covered with the police and military at times when there were terrorist attacks or with the threat of them. It was a very common problem in Europe for many years. And I would go through, I remember walking through the airport in Rome and Da Vinci and seeing all these young Italian men from the military. They were under alert. There was a real danger at the time, it was felt. They had their weapons. And I looked at them, it didn't look like they were much more than about 18 or 19 years old, and I thought, I really hope they know what they're doing, and I trust that they do. But that's the sort of situation. And I also worked during a period of time when there were people who didn't like Americans, and you had to be aware of things and alert to things. So much of this is history at this stage of the game. But it wasn't history then, it was just day-to-day. So I had been thinking in terms of terrorism and the potential for a long time, certainly in the 90s, and long before 2001, before 9/11. And it was, in my mind, it was always a question of when, not if, something would happen in the U.S. It just didn't make any sense that it never did. So it happened, all right? And I had heard of Osama bin Laden, and I remembered him back when he was in the Sudan working there, and I knew he was a college graduate. For heaven's sakes, most people still don't seem to know that. And I had background, some on Al-Qaeda and so on, because they were being discussed. It wasn't a secret. There was nothing spooky about it. It's just part of what was being discussed in many of the areas of the world where I was. And so I was aware of it. And so I had no question at all in my mind on that terrible day as to who was behind it. As simple as that. And there had been an earlier attempt in 1993 that I was aware of in New York with the World Trade Center. So I had this sort of background. And because of where I'd been and the work I'd done, I brought to it certain understanding that a lot of Americans might not have had at that time. So I was interviewed, talked to by various and sundry news organizations, and I always tried to be as helpful as I possibly could, and so on. Now, this is February of 2004. It's 2.5 years after 9/11, effectively. It's not an issue. It's still an issue, but it's not like it was. By this stage of the game, you still wondered if something was going to go wrong, but you didn't center your life around it. I certainly didn't. And I had too many other things to do. I traveled a great deal during that period, and nothing happened. So I thought I was fine. I recovered from the shock of 9/11 quite handily. And it was that day, as I stood there at the window looking out, I realized what had happened was that I had been carrying it as a burden. After all, I did international work. I was exposed to dangers more often than many people. And it was gone. That nagging fear that I had while I lived in the U.S., while I was working there. After all, I worked in the Washington, D.C. area. It just was gone. And that was it. I was finally somewhere where I had no fear of this at all. And it was beautiful, and it was welcoming, and it was friendly, and every Panamanian I had met up till then had been really kind and really generous and really helpful. And it was so relaxing that was the weight that had been lifted off my shoulders. I think of that today. And I thought, matter of fact, just a couple of days ago, I remembered that time. Not a good time for many of us, and how we got through it all. But I see us also going through a lot of tensions and difficulties today. And I see it and hear it in the voices and see it in the faces of people who come to visit. Often, not a lot, but occasionally it just comes out, and I can't blame them. People from Europe and North America, even from China or Asia, the Chinese territory around China, they bring their concerns, their anxieties, their fears. They're on edge. They're very unhappy sometimes. Everything's fine, and then suddenly something will come up and people just sort of explode. And it's been very distressing to see that and to have to deal with it. But I understand people are going through, and some people, and I take it in stride. And recently I've noticed that regardless of what people's politics are, I've never seen politics as a critical issue here at all. I just see this as across the board, that they were getting exhausted by the whole affair. They're really, really tired. And there doesn't seem to be any end to it, and so forth. And I'm looking at people who truly, truly are carrying a burden, if anything, 100 times heavier than anything I carried, because I was so used to it. At least I've had experience in it. At least I could analyze. It's hard to analyze when you really don't have any background in this, and the fear and it's not of being in Panama, it's back home. It's there, folks. I'm sorry, but and I don't, again, I don't talk politics here, and I'm not interested in that. I don't have to. This is something that I felt from so many people, that from every imaginable political viewpoint, that all I can say to you now is that maybe, and hopefully, if you do, whether you move to Panama or another nation, choose one, I hope, that you really like, not because you think you should go there or one thing or another, but because you do like it. And then let go as much as possible of that burden you may be carrying. You may not even know you're carrying it too much, but you may have your day when you're looking around you and realize, oh, wow, I feel so much lighter. I can only tell you that was not the reason I came down, but it certainly was one of those. And it was a welcome addition. I hadn't expected it. It took me totally by surprise. And yet it was there. And I'm very grateful that it did. And I'm very grateful that I made the decision I did, and that I'm here now. And I want to encourage you, If you have any anxiety, and this is a problem that you carry around with you, if you can feel that burden now where you are, you too may find that same release once you get far enough away from it and stay away from it and get involved in your local community and get to know people around you. That's critical. And just do things and live your life. I would hope that you'd feel exactly that. And it's something that if you can accomplish it, it's wonderful. And I strongly encourage you to do it because I know it can be done anywhere, but it's so much harder to do it when you're sitting in the middle of it. I have to go on because of the analysis I do and the work I do professionally. I have to be aware of what's going on in the three areas that concern me the most where I would not live, North America, Europe, and China. Frankly, because if one of them has a problem, they all do, and I just have had enough of that. Mm-hmm. So I am delighted to be here to one side, and it's not that I would be unaffected, but it gives me some distance, it gives me some perspective, it gives me a chance to relax and not to have to think about it, to walk out the door, and it doesn't even enter my mind. It can go that way for days, it can go that way for weeks pretty much, except when, of course, I'm reading the news. But it's one thing to read it in the news, and it's another thing to live in the middle of it. So I don't regret that. And so why did I move to Panama? Well, there's a lot of reasons, but this is one that I just thought I would mention. It's very personal, and it may not resonate with you at all. You may think, no, that's not my problem, and that's great. But if it does at all, there's hope. I mean, it can be better. And in my book, I found it better here, and it's one of the reasons why every morning I get up and I'm happy to be here. So enough from that. I wanted to add that. It's a little personal viewpoint. And next time, I feel up to it, and I think I will. I did okay tonight. I'm still operating. So I'll try to get these other two videos done and up to you as soon as I can. Thanks so much for stopping by and putting up for my rambling conversation tonight.